go ahead and get started. Next, we're going to have Mark Erickson with RS Fiber, and along with Nancy Hoffman at Chisago County. Nancy is also the Minnesota chair of the World Broadband Coalition. We're going to have those two folks come up and talk about financing options.
Do I need to use a mic? You guys hear me okay? Because I can't do that very well.
Which was the presentation on
That's the IT expert up there. Do you have a degree in IT?
No.
There you go.
And you know, after you train me after months.
Okay, you guys know me. My name is Mark Erickson. I'm the retired city administrator and EDA director in Winthrop, Minnesota. I'm on the RS Fiber Board Cooperative for another 2 months and then I'm done. We're going to talk about RS Fiber for just a little bit, how we got started. We got started in 2008, and we hooked up our first customer in 2015. So it took 7 years of working to make it happen. I'm just going to go one slide about RS Fiber and what it is, and then we'll talk about how we financed it and the mistakes we made and the trouble we're in, not the trouble we're in today, but the best laid plans with mice and men often gain belief. RS Fiber is a 308B telecommunications cooperative covering parts of Sibley, McLeod, Nicollet, and Bentonville counties, approximately 1,200 square miles in footprint. Involves 10 communities in phase 1, the smallest is 400, and the largest is 2,300. It also includes 17 townships as a planned phase 2 fiber to the farm project, but we'll see how that goes. It's an active Ethernet network capable of symmetrical gigabit connections with very low latency. You guys know what an active Ethernet is. Each subscriber has its own home run fiber back to the central office. So I have the fiber line in my home. There's a plug for it just for me in the office. We do phone and cable TV and internet service. We're 4K TV ready. Again, phase 1 was fiber to the farm, or fiber to 10 cities, 50-25 wireless to the farm, and we'll see how the other goes. That's kind of our footprint. You can't really see it very well, but this is the Minnesota River. This is Scott County, I believe, or this is LeSueur County. Scott and LeSueur. But green are our 10 partners, our 10 cities. How do we finance it? Well, we ended up financing it with what's called a generally obligated geotax abatement bond. It's just kind of like a tip. So the value of the properties that's increased by the fiber connection can be used as a potential tax increase source for a future need. We loan that money to a private cooperative as an economic development loan. One city, Buffalo Lake, loaned their share. They just put cash in. They didn't want to participate in the bond process. They wanted to put cash in so they get the interest and principal payments back. Cooperative, I'm going to get water. The cooperative, in exchange for that loan, the cooperative agreed to serve the communities with the fiber network. The cities do not have an equity stake in the project. They do not have a seat on the cooperative board of directors, and they have no oversight of the day-to-day operations of the network. They're last in line for borrowing. They subordinated themselves to every loan we have. You guys know what that means? I'll talk about it in a minute. So what was the financing scheme? Phase one was about an $18 million project. We did it with the $8.7 million tax abatement bond, 20 years at 4%. That's key. You need long-term, low-interest money to make this happen. We got a $1 million state broadband grant. Thank you, Diane. And we got about $8 million in loans from a consortium of local banks. And we got approximately $2 million in total from a USDA Rural Economic Development Loan and Grant, a red leg, and a READ loan, and then member equity. We had about $700,000 in member equity. The cooperative made the bond payments for the first 2 years, but cash flow, turned out last year, was not sufficient to meet those bond payments, so we notified the cities that they will begin to make those bond payments. Want to stop talking about that for a minute? Anybody have any questions on it? So here are the 10 cities. Here's their household, and that's what they loaned against their properties in their communities in order to participate in the $8.7 million loan. So in the city of Winthrop, we have $1.3 million as part of that geotax abatement fund. We loaned that money to the cooperative. They made the bond payments for the first 2 years. We are now making those bond payments, and we will for the next several years. Back to water. Where are we at today? We have a 100-mile fiber backbone connecting the 10 cities. We have 10 cities that are fully built out and operational. We have 18 wireless access points that I talked about earlier. We have 2,000 plus customers, including almost 1,000 ag producers. Actually, have over 1,000. And we are just in the process in the next couple of 3 weeks of completing a refinancing plan that will allow it to grow, eventually take over bond payments, and the money that the cities are putting in today, they will get back on the tail end. So we will make full restitution to all the cities for all their taxes plus interest. That's all I got. But you must have some questions. Travis?
So Mark, how are the cities, are they paying back those bond payments as of right now until RS Fiber doesn't refinance?
Yeah, it's a semi-annual payment. So they made the first one in January. We have the way it's structured is there's a debt service reserve fund that's financed from the bond proceeds. Excuse me, and the cities agreed to replenish that fund if we drew from it. So we drew from it in January to make a bond payment, and they have to replenish that. So we've raised taxes in all the towns except Buffalo Lake in order, plus some took out reserves in order to do that. The upside, if there is an upside to this, and there is that the amount of taxes, well, okay, the state of Minnesota has the most complicated property tax structure of any state in the nation. They have almost 100 different classifications of property. So all 10 of our cities have different tax rates they pay based on the value of the homes in their area. It's very complicated, but they're all similar. But in Winthrop, for example, my taxes are going up about $110 a year to pay for this. Okay, about $10 a month, somewhere in there. But because there's now competition in the marketplace, the price of telecommunication services has dropped $40 to $50 to $60 a month. So people are saving more in their telecom bill than they're actually paying in taxes. Get that? That's a hard thing to get across to people when you're standing in the council meeting and they're asking why their taxes are going up. But you remind them, what are you paying for your cable bill now? Oh, I'm paying less. Yes, you wouldn't be paying less unless RS Fiber was there, right? If there was no competition there, it would just be the same. I was telling Micah at lunch, that's one of the reasons that the city of Broadband joined. They're halfway between Winthrop and Hutch. And half of their employees work in Hutchinson at 3M. Half of the people in town work. There's lots of work up there. The two guys on the council noticed that because Hutchinson has competition, they have no telecom and Mediacom, that the price of the Mediacom package in Broughton, and I'm not picking on Mediacom at all, please don't don't take that away from this, that the price of the same package in Broughton was substantially lower, or substantially higher than it was in Hutch. And, you know, and they asked, so they had the MediaCom guy come in and say, you know, so why is this? And he said, well, because we can charge what we want, there's no competition. And that's when they made the decision to join Irish Fiber. And while they have raised their taxes to have the privilege of having Irish Fiber there, they are saving more money as individual taxpayers than they are paying in additional taxes. Make sense? But we're just in the last a couple of weeks, so we'll be refinancing, reset, recapitalizing everything. That's it. Yes, sir.
You mentioned there was 2 cities in the greater area of RS that didn't join, is that correct?
Correct.
How are they impacted, or what's their plan, say 5 years from now, or 2 years from now? Like you said, Brown just joined.
Well, they joined back in 2010, yeah.
How are you addressing any of those new ones? Obviously, the infrastructure presumably is there or not?
It's a complicated, it's a good question, it's a complicated answer, it's local politics. They did not join the project because of local politics. They had some leadership that, I don't want to get in trouble here because I haven't been in trouble, that didn't see the value of fiber and didn't see the value of broadband and were convinced by their provider, because I heard the conversation, I'll never need more than 6 megs in my house. I'll never need more than 6 megabits in my house, so why would we build RS fiber? And that's a hard argument to overcome if that's what they do. We've asked them, we've told them that if they want to join us, we can, but it's on terms. The largest town, which is Arlington, they pay more for their broadband bills than we do in all the other towns. Gaylord, which is 7 miles to the west of Arlington and 7 miles to the east of us, just announced a 4-year medical school because of the fiber, only because of the fiber. So we consider that a win, not just for Gaylord, but for the entire area.
Did you guys put in the fiber to Arlington?
We have fiber around Arlington.
I mean, somewhere throughout the process.
Like Arlington that goes around it like that. And
Right, so I mean, in the future, to tap into it would be relatively easy.
relatively easy. Yeah. Okay, Nancy.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Chisago County HRA EDA. Do you want me to use that? Do I need that? No. Because I want to see I gotta see my notes. So I thought I'd talk just a little bit about Chisago County and our situation there, some successes that we've had, and then where are we going from here. I just gotta tell you that this PowerPoint's getting a lot of use. I showed it first at the Broadband Border Conference, and it's really working out for a lot of presentations around my county, chamber meetings, Rotary, you name it. So I don't see anyone here unless you're at the Border Conference that might have seen this already. So in 2016, we did a survey of our county to find out really what is the situation. You know, who's getting served by what providers, and how are people enjoying or not their services, and we asked a ton of questions. But one of the questions that we asked was, if you had better fiber to or if you had better broadband to your home, what would you do with it? And just to mention, we did get 879 responses, which is pretty darn good. We gave away a free iPad if they filled out the survey. They got into a drawing for that, and I think that helped. But as you can see from the map, we every dot has responded to our survey, and so we didn't have a good cross-section across the township, across the county. Anyway, the people that responded said 94% said they would want better broadband. If they could have it, they would take it. 86% said they would use it to improve their quality of life, mostly meaning they could then watch Netflix, they could use telehealth, they could play video games. All of that, so it's just expected today, as you all know. 45% said they would use it for education, whether it's K through 12, or if they wanted to take college classes. 34% in our county said they would telecommute. We are 30 to 50 miles away from the metro area. 75% of our people commute out, and a lot of them could telecommute if they had better broadband. So that was very important to us. And then 31% said they would start a business. This really piqued the interest of our HRA and EDA, and we knew we needed to get more involved in trying to bring better broadband to our county. I want to point out here before I go on. So the red dots on the bottom, that's a lot of, those are Frontier customers, and the purple dots more to the north are CenturyLink. There's a few other services. I think yellow is Mid-Continent, which you kind of see in the cities and around the lake. And then there's a few wireless customers as well. That'll be important later. As you can see, we have a lot of red in our county, especially towards the east. A lot of the areas that are served are just our cities and not always at the best. Chisago County rated 63 out of 87 counties for broadband, for 25-free service, so not so good. You think a county as close to the metro as we are would have better service than that. It's getting better, but maybe a little dated now, so I'll have to check on that. This is a slide that Bill Coleman did, but I do like to show it because a lot of people, it is a good visual to show what CAP 2 funding can do. This is the Lindstrom Exchange, and so Bill went out and GPS or all of the DSLAMs, and where you see the circle, the small circle, that would be where they can receive 25 free service, and once you start getting out of that, you're more into the 10-1. And so you can see that as well. You can see the larger circles where they receive 10-1 service. And actually, Bill would say Lindstrom isn't such a bad area. It's covered pretty good. Right?
Are they seeing that 25-3?
No, they're not. This is the Frontier area, and we're seeing that people are telling me they're lucky if they can get 4. You know, I don't know if they have any upload. It's been pretty bad. And I blame it on the copper to the home. I just think it's all really old service out there and needs some, that's what needs updating. So our first project was in Sunrise Township, and it all started because we had a business there with about 50 employees who came to us and said, we can't work from here anymore unless we have better broadband. It was their largest expense. And so, so we called in CenturyLink and Department of Employment and Economic Development and started talking about what can we do to help serve this business. And then through that, a few of the residents started speaking up saying, we want this too. We can't just bring it out to one business. We want this throughout our township. So CenturyLink came in and they said, well, this is what we can do. We can either upgrade the whole area, and mind you, it's only half of a township. The other half is served by Frontier. They said we can either do, use our CAP 2 funding and bring 25-3 in, or 10-1, which would be a big improvement for a lot of that area. Or we can bring fiber to the home, but then we need you to partner with us. And so we did apply for a board grant, and the township also partnered. So we had 584 residents in that area with 10 businesses, and we applied for a border-to-border grant, which was 45% of the project. You can read the numbers yourself, but CenturyLink then came in using their CAP 2 dollars at 30% of the project, and Sunrise Township came in at 25% of the project. So it was a $2 million project. They chose to go with the subordinated service district bonding, which is because they were only doing half of the township, they did not want to tax everybody in the township or half the township to receive the service. And so that is a little bit complicated. You have to go out and get 51% of the residents to sign a petition. It's not as easy as it sounds. They want, if you have a wife and a husband, let's say on a deed, they both have to sign it. Anybody on a deed has to sign it. And in a county where you have a lot of commuters, it's not that easy to catch them at home and get these signatures. But we had such a great group of residents that wanted this so bad, they put a lot of hard time and energy into making it happen. So then the township had the choice. They decided that they would assess by parcel. Everybody was assessed at $1,000. They could either pay the $1,000 up front, and then they bond less, or they could pay $100 a year for 10 years for the bonds. That caught on pretty quick, and other townships were talking about it, but Fish Lake Township jumped on board very quickly. Right before the grants were due, they moved fast. They had great staff that showed. Sometimes in your townships, they don't really have staff. I had one person that hand raised the minutes. They're just not all that professional, I guess. So anyway, they did apply for a grant as well. They were able to move quickly. They brought a group together. Now they use technology and emails and newsletters to get people riled up and come out and help get other people involved. And we did a survey of the township members. It was not required, but the township members, supervisors thought that they kind of wanted to know what the people thought. We did get 50% of the residents completed that, I should say households completed the survey, which was great. And after about 25%, it doesn't change too much. So they probably didn't need that many, but it really helped the township supervisors say, 85% of those said yes, they wanted this. And so it made it easy for them to say, okay, we'll move ahead. Again, it was CenturyLink that we worked with, and they were fabulous at getting the information we needed and doing engineering quickly so we could move ahead. And that was 919 households and 7 businesses. And again, 40% were border grants, so just a little less than we did in Sunrise. CenturyLink and Fish Lake picking up the rest of it, with CenturyLink doing a little more. And they chose to do the tax abatement bonds, similar to Mark's area. So this is just really an increase in your levy to pay off the bonds. They did not need the petition, but they chose to do the survey. And the township is, everybody's just assessed, a certain percent higher on the taxes to cover it. They went out 15 years with their bonds because they're thinking they have this great broadband. They're going to have more people moving into the area, and that money will be, those costs will be spread out further in time. So the payments might actually go down. I happen to live in Fish Lake Township. It's just lovely having fiber to the home. And I pay about $120 a year, so $10 a month roughly. And I'm still working on, this is very new to us, we just got it in, I'm still working on how I can get rid of DirecTV, and I know there's a lot of options out there for streaming TV. I just want to make sure I don't lose the channels that I really want, so I'm taking my time. But I'm looking forward to some savings.
What kind of speeds do you have? At what price?
I went with 40.
40?
Yeah, and it's $35 plus all your costs that come with it. I believe the 120 was $65 a month. Am I right, Kirsten?
Yes, existing customers. If you're a new customer, we have a one gig promotion. That 1 gig was $65. If you were a new customer, and that's the price we like. So, anything over 40 meg, depending on if you're an existing customer or not, we're anywhere from 35 to 45 up to 85.
Yeah, I think I'm actually saving more than I was paying more before through CenturyLink. So All right, I think I covered all that. I just love this slide. I presented this before Broadband Day at the Capitol, but it's just very important to keep talking to your legislators and see if we can't get that 70 million for this next biennium. We'll be talking more about that later on. So, okay, so now we have 1.5 townships done, and we have 7.5 to go, plus the rural cities. So we continue to try to work on this. I hope to work with Kirsten a little more on the northern townships and see if we can't get some fiber to those areas. But we're kind of focused right now on some of the southern townships in the frontier area. Let's get that one. So we're working with Joe at CTC. He's working in our area in Santee County. He's looking at their whole county, and then he's working just south of us in Scandia, and we thought, well, this would be great if, you know, this all came together, maybe it just keeps on going right on up. So I left the slide and I was going to take it out, but I decided to leave it in just to remind people we have an engineering study through CTC, and then we also want a little bit of money to use for our surveys for mailings and things. Those things get kind of expensive. And so we did apply to the Blandon Foundation. They have the robust feasibility study, broadband feasibility study funding. So if you have customers that are looking at projects, you know, keep in mind that there's funding available for rural areas to do these kinds of studies. So they broke it out. Our HRA EDA is totally behind it, so we're participating along with the townships. And we're also looking at Chisago Lakes, which is like 2 townships. For broadband. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. We're kind of waiting on the engineering to be done to see what the costs are.
It'll be less. It'll be less than what Joe told you.
Is it? Yeah. You didn't tell me anything else. Why did So we're waiting to see what that is, and then we'll sit down and see if we can put a package together. And I'm sure we'll be looking at the rural broadband program, and if there's any others out there. It doesn't sound like we're eligible for USDA, but you know, we'll see what else is out there. I did just want to go back to that one slide that I skipped over. I just jumped a little too quick. We just really found it, and we've been saying it all day long, you have to have a willing provider to work with you. The township cities have to be involved. The residents have to be out there advocating. And the border-to-border grant is just really important to get these projects done, and you just need all of that to make it happen. And I think we heard that a number of times today, but I just have to reiterate because that's what we found too. Okay. Any questions? On financing or anything?
I just question on the ubiquitous nature of the project. Does everyone in that township get service? So they're all putting in on paying the debt, but they all get service then?
Well, it goes by their home. For instance, in Fish Lake, they ran it by. I had to call in and have it brought up to the house. They will bring it to the house, but I have to pay for a connection fee and that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of a cost. You know, if people choose not to do it, they don't have to, but they will be paying on the bonds.
And one thing about the geotax abatement bond, if your house is worth $500,000, you're paying more than I'm paying on a monthly basis for your taxes, just because it's based on the value of your property.
But you didn't leave any areas isolated because they're hard to get to.
Right, no, that was the goal. Everybody gets the opportunity to be served. All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Again, about 3 to 4 minutes to do the switch over for the next panel, which will be on economic development. So, Bill Coleman and Micah Myers will be our presenters.
closer.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Open the mic already.
Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity to be here today with you to talk about economic development. The discussion so far is all about trying to get networks. And my presentation is what do we do with these networks? What is the value that we can get for this network for your community? And I've been a big fan of the intelligent community framework now for more than a decade. We used that in Dakota County when I was executive director of Dakota Future, an economic development group there with the cities and the chambers and the county organizations and the colleges in that county. We use this framework to enable some collaboration between the communities. The Intelligent Community Forum has an annual competition to name the most intelligent community in the world. Dakota County made the top 21 communities 3 years in a row. We could never get over that hurdle to the next level, into the final 7. But we found it really effective for building coalitions and then for building collaboration across the various intelligent community frameworks. In essence, the framework says, building on a foundation of high-quality broadband services, a community can improve workforce, innovation, digital equity, sustainability, while shaping its internal and external advocacy messaging to attract people and investment. A lot of intelligent community strategies involve 2 or 3 of those elements, and we find those to be really the most impactful and the most sustainable when they're out of their silos and into a more collaborative arena. We know, in economic development now, when I worked for the Department of Economic Development back more than 20 years ago now, the community profiles, they had one line about telecommunications, said name of phone company and a phone number for the phone company in terms of, everyone could always get a phone, or maybe somebody needed a T1, but it was a pretty simple thing that no matter where you're located, you would be able to get a phone adequate for your business at your location. But now we know that broadband has moved way up in the top 2 or 3 or 4 location considerations for businesses looking for a location. We know that that's an essential infrastructure, but it's really the network users who generate the economic return on investment and other benefits for the community. And so the real question is, what is your community doing to maximize this benefit? That return on investment is a justification for building both public and private sector networks. But different types of providers, publicly traded, privately held, cooperatives, and governments, all have different ways of measuring that return on investment and have very different balance sheets. A community balance sheet includes items not found on that of any publicly traded company, things like economic development, empowered schools, innovative healthcare, social equity, and other community considerations. As I don't know if Mark mentioned, I wasn't paying close enough attention, they're finalizing deals for medical school in Sibley County now, in Gaylord, and in good part due to the fiber network that's in place there. That's a huge benefit to the community that doesn't show up on the RS Fiber balance sheet, but it sure shows up on the community balance sheet. And so that's an important thing to think about. But it's not enough to have just great broadband infrastructure. It's necessary but not sufficient. It's kind of like your home exercise equipment. You know, you actually have to get on that equipment to get any benefit from it. And that's the same thing with your broadband services. How many people in this room believe they have good to great broadband infrastructure and services in your community? That senior task is clear, to stimulate active and sophisticated use of broadband by area organizations and residents. How many people are working to improve their broadband services? I say, you know, good luck on that, because that does take some luck as well as persistence. Some communities have achieved that in short time periods, 18 to 24 months. We just heard about Fish Lake Township, to kind of 0 to 60, and you know, construction in less than a year. That's really impressive. But others take a long time and struggle to find that better broadband. As Nancy said, Landon Foundation has a couple programs designed to help you build a better community coalition and to identify best options. The feasibility study, and then technical assistance that's available through something called Community Broadband Resources. So that's really available to any rural place. But a second, but also important challenge for you is to remember to encourage the organizations and residents in your area to step up now using the broadband services that are available. You know, most people don't need a gigabit symmetrical connection to do their business operations or operate their household effectively at this point in time. And so there's a meat market up in Bemidji. They've got over 10,000 Facebook followers, and the guy just uses his cell phone to use that online tool. And so a lot of things can be done using technology that don't require big bandwidth, but require investment and smart thinking on the part of area residents. So don't forget about that. Don't say we can't do that until we have a great network. Make do with what you have. You know, broadband, things to think about. You know, I think communities need at a minimum to focus on achieving that Minnesota 2026 goal of 100 down and 20 up. You know, that 25-3 goal, that's all well and fine, but that's the FCC's minimum definition of broadband. And for us to have a goal that is the minimum definition with something that's moving as dynamically as broadband speeds, I think that's underachieving. You need to know that also for a certain group of end users that upload speed is really critical. People who are involved in creative enterprises, video creation, large data files like engineers and so on. Again, in Sibley County, in little town of Gibbon, now they've got engineers working on Main Street doing 3D printing. They're sending large data files up and back. If you've been through Gibbon, that is a town of about 400 people. And to have 5 highly skilled people now working downtown, that's another thing that's on their balance sheet. So think about that upload speed as a critical piece, not just the download speed. You might hear that arguments against the need for world-class broadband, that no one needs a gig. Know that broadband use in households is doubling every 2 to 3 years in terms of the amount of data that people are consuming. Some of those devices that people have, more and more devices in their home, are medical devices that connect directly to the internet, and you don't want that internet not only to be fast, but you want it to be very reliable. And so that's a critical piece to this story as well. No one ever says, oh, I have too much electric capacity coming into my house. We just know that we can plug in almost anything we want, unless you have an arc welder in your garage or something, that your electricity is going to work for you. So you also hear that world-class internet is just for Netflix. You know, in comparison, I never hear anyone say that I-35 going to Duluth is just used by tourists. You know, we know that these infrastructures have a variety of uses. Some of them are fun, that's okay, but they also serve a huge part in the economic success of our communities. Finally, we hear that broadband fund only helps rural people, when in reality, the network traffic goes both ways. Metro businesses working with suppliers and customers, and those pesky metro tourists making North Shore reservations. People often ask about the world going wireless. Know that wireless needs fiber, and fiber needs wireless. These things go together. People want to be connected all the time. Know too that most wireless services now tops out at 50 to 100 megabits. We know that U.S. Internet in Minneapolis is offering a 10 gig residential service, and that 8K televisions are on the way. And so this idea that 50 to 100 megs in 3 to 5 years is going to be good enough. The capacity over fiber is actually streaming out faster, growing at a faster pace than it is for the wireless improvements. For many rural communities, ensuring that the rural countryside is connected is a critical strategy. These rural areas on lakes, rivers, and acreages can be a real attraction for new residents, but only with broadband services. I've heard many stories of prospective rural residents requiring broadband as a precondition for purchasing a home. One survey shows that 70% of home buyers require a quality broadband connection. Mark and I had a conversation about this at lunch about when he sold his house in Alexandria, the extraordinary efforts he made to make sure that the person who was moving into their house could have the same connection that he had previously. Sometimes there's a lack of capacity in rural areas, and people are disappointed when they move in. It's important that a community can count on the broadband provider or providers to be an economic development partner. In my opinion, this requires great customer service, a willingness to invest in advance in high priority development areas, and openly and honestly sharing deployment plans. So that's the first element, that really the foundation of intelligent community. In terms of knowledge workers, you can see the questions I have for you ask yourself about your own community. We know that workforce attraction and retention is now the #1 economic development strategy for communities, from rural communities to the greater MSP economic development group. Broadband everywhere is critical to attract the technologists. Telework capabilities may be the element to convince a trailing spouse to an area. Just working now with the town of Belgrade, their school superintendent moved in. Town was having trouble getting a decent internet connection. His spouse, his wife, was a teleworker. And so he said, if I had known how hard it was going to be to get internet in this town, he might not have accepted that job as a school superintendent. So you can see how this really impacts the community. Brainerd Lakes area has created a collaborative effort to directly recruit technical talent to the community. This is supported by the Brainerd Lakes Area Economic Development Group, by CTC, and about a dozen other companies that need the technical talent really to operate their businesses. They pay a fee for that service. Enabling prospective workers to gain skills so they can effectively participate in the workforce is an important workforce strategy. Economic developers a lot of times don't necessarily think about digital equity. They think maybe that's more for people, do-gooders or social work and so on. But we know in this workforce shortage environment that we have that's not going away, that we need to make sure that everyone can be productive and really actively participate in community. So there's a strong link between workforce development and digital equity. Another consideration for that is when residents are not connected. It becomes more difficult for local organizations to effectively use technology themselves. Because if you can't reach your clientele using technology, that means phone calls, that means printing materials, that means newspaper ads, all kinds of other tools that you actually have to double up. You have to be ready to reach that clientele that's connected and go old school to reach those who aren't. And so that's really stymies innovation in a lot of ways. Target audiences include older adults, new Americans, families with low income. We find libraries and community education to be our best partners on digital equity issues. So think about them as partners for these things. This picture is of PCs for People. They're a nonprofit group I'm on the board of in the Twin Cities. We've now refurbished about 1,500 computers a month, distribute them nationally. We've distributed computers in all 50 states now, and also offer a low-cost wireless service over Sprint services. And so for $13 a month, people can get unlimited data services if they qualify as low income. So if you're in an area with decent Sprint service, which can be pretty limited in rural Minnesota, that's an option for folks there. So they're a great group and a national model. Innovation is another pillar of intelligent community, doing new things as well as doing old things in new and better ways. For some communities and some people in rural Minnesota, catching up to where they should be is innovation. You know, it doesn't have to be 3M lab coat kind of perspective in terms of innovation. It might be as simple as claiming a Google Place for your local business, or having a business Facebook page, or doing any number of things that are on the relatively low end of the innovation scale, but new for them. And so I encourage you to think about those kind of strategies. We know that few businesses can survive long-term by just doing business as usual. If you're not keeping up, that means you're really falling behind, and that's a critical piece. Qualified technology assistance is not immediately visible in a lot of rural communities. There may be technologists, but they might be out on their acreage, or they might have customers all over the world that they're providing web services for, e-commerce marketing kind of services, but networking, but they're not visible in their community. Sometimes rural people, businesses don't want to pay for those services. They think, oh man, that's $1,000, and they just did a few computer clicks and thought it was easy. They don't necessarily see the value. And so anything you can do to help small businesses step on that technology ladder and increase their skills is going to be a big thing. This should really be a part of your business retention expansion program. And we're seeing some really smart communities start to make good use of technology questions on their business retention expansion programs. New firms are the lifeblood of any economy. One of the big considerations for intelligent communities is how many new businesses are starting in your community. And that's an important thing. We know that in Minnesota there's a number of great innovation centers in rural places. Bemidji, Red Wing, Wilmer, Ely now have centers where people can come, access high technology, high bandwidth, get assistance, get encouragement, network with their peers, all in an effort to try and kind of grease the skids so people can move forward faster on starting new businesses. And that should be an important part of any strategy as well. These places don't have to be fancy. It's about 1,500 square feet, maybe in the basement of a building, a bank building in Ely, where they have their center. So it doesn't have to be big or fancy, but you do need to create an environment that has this pro-business development attitude. You just can't say, oh, we got great bandwidth and have some desks, you know, in a kind of a dreary dungeon kind of place. It's got to be nice and have that rate piece going for it. Sustainability is the newest element that they recently added to the intelligent community model. Really economic development with the future in mind. You know, Michael Porter, through his competitiveness model, talks about government regulation as a good thing, because government regulations make businesses work smarter, avoid toxic chemicals, be safer, be smarter, and the businesses in high regulated environments are actually more globally competitive. Is what one country has as a regulation today might be commonplace around the world. Communities can also have goals around sustainability: lower CO2, more alternative energy, more recycling, less solid waste, etc. So how can you help your business and your community become more sustainable and put those things on the front burner? And that leads into the final element, which is advocacy. It's your communication strategy for motivating positive change. It might be as simple as how do we get a bond issue passed for technology in your community, but it's also about welcoming newcomers to your community. And as my friend Carl Sampo I worked with for quite a while would say, you know, when you moved to Brainerd, that everyone would talk to you about fishing, but no one would take you fishing. So as you think about the idea of new people in your community, especially rural communities that people might be moving from the city, There's, now in a rural community, there's fewer things to do maybe, and you need more encouragement, more support. How do you attract those kind of people? Well, how do you invest in a fiber network? Mark Erickson attended more than 100 community meetings in Sibley County to talk about fiber to the home. And that's a lot of that. You have to have a plan to figure out how do we motivate this change to invest in our own community so we can create a brand that's attractive to people. I know that Greater Minnesota, Greater MSP has a huge effort to try and attract young professional technical talent to the Twin Cities. They have an effort to make sure that when people of color move to the community, that they're not isolated, that they feel part of a greater community, and that's an important part of their effort. Their new director, that was his main claim to fame, was launching that program and helping to increase the number of people. It's one thing to attract people to your community, it's another thing to keep them and bring them as long-term residents. So ultimately, what people make, the other piece of this is your online presence, not just your own, but that of all the organizations in your community. When people look, millennials look at a town, here's a job opportunity in whatever town in Minnesota, they go online first and they look. What's the social scene? Are there breweries? Are there community calendar where there's activity? Is there any nightlife or kayaking or whatever is important to them? If they don't see it online, it doesn't exist. And you want to motivate them at least to get in their car and drive to your community and give you a chance at making that sale to attract them to the community. Michael Moore was the previous economic developer in Thief River Falls. Their biggest issue there is the labor force. How can they get workers? DigiKey just has another big expansion up there. And of course it's flat, there's not many trees, the wind blows about 30 miles an hour, always from the north. And he said, well, no wonder no one will come to Thief River Falls, their web presence was so terrible. Of course, there may be many other reasons people won't come to Thief River, but there's a certain percentage of people say, hey man, I can drive snowmobiles fast there. That's what one guy told me, that's why he lives in northwest Minnesota. That's the guy you're looking for. And so, but they need to be able to see that online in your own messaging. So you want to be able to track people to do that. So I encourage you to think about this framework to build your community coalition that implement broadband-based economic development. ICF's annual competitions in the final stage for this year, with the winner to be announced January 13th in New York. The conference has a global audience with teams participating from the 7 finalist communities. The conference provides a friendly, collaborative environment. I'm actually on the jury to pick that Intelligent Community Year. It's fascinating what communities are doing. I participated in the effort from the 21 to the 7 and now to the Community of the Year. The world is very competitive. I encourage you to get on board with that. Blandman Foundation is bringing a delegation of people. We're open to having people come and pay their own way to join us, but to try and get this intelligent movement going here in the Twin Cities, or in Minnesota. So if you're interested, let me know and I can steer you to a discounted conference rate. So that's my contact information, and I appreciate your attention. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Micah?
I don't want to go through the introductions, so I did introductions earlier. I wanted to kind of recap on how we build our network, and also filling in Perry from Scott County was going to do this presentation. I can touch base on some of the projects that I've known Perry and his predecessor Scott or Gary for some time, and seeing the economic impact they've had with their fiber network is huge. I'll start in with that. They've landed a lot of big manufacturers such as Emerson Manufacturing, Shutterfly, Datacard, all place their facilities in Scott County because of the fiber network they built. With Emerson Manufacturing, Scott County provided the transport, Jaguar provided the lit service. They picked up not only the manufacturing plant, but 2 plants and the connections to 511, which is key. Very highly skilled, high-paying jobs. Those are things that we kind of missed the mark on. One of the things working with neighbor community, to try and get them to expand or build a fiber presence. They're looking at how they're gonna capture revenue right away, and I say, you're missing the mark. It's like, how do you retain the businesses you have and capture new businesses? So I'll give you a little history of the Granite Fiber Network. We built our network in 1998. We have almost 400 miles of fiber in the ground in 4 counties. It was a partnership between the City of St. Cloud and St. Cloud Schools. What we realized is we did different things the same. We had to need to connect our facilities, and we didn't want to pay internet drops to everyone at a time. It was dial-up internet and everything. So my predecessor had a concept to build a fiber network and connect all these facilities. We started with a STAR topology, which starts from my City Hall facility. So I've got close to 2,000 strands of fiber coming into that facility that redistributed on the scope. And in the 12 years that I've been managing this network, we've ringed a lot of that. And as I was telling folks at lunch, in the last 5 years, I spent over $500,000 expanding my fiber network, and it didn't cost the city or school district one penny. It was the partnerships we built to help us expand that network. We got creative with how we did it. We did, they would put up, like they would enter into a lease agreement, but they would prepay a lease for like 10 years. That was my capital dollars to build it. We still maintain and repair the fiber infrastructure, but they, for our hospitals, good case. Centric has a plaza on the west side of St. Cloud, and they have a hospital downtown. They want to connect them, so part of our original build in '98, we partnered with, it's now Windstream, used to be Lake Dell Communications and Integrity. And they had empty conduit that they put in the ground for future expansion where we had our fiber. And I reached out to both entities and said, look, I've got someone that's willing to pay capital also put fiber in your conduit, and they will, all they're asking for is dark fiber. They don't want lit service from you. And that will deliver you to the doorstep to the neighboring community I'm working with right now, Sartell, which has a huge medical business park that's growing. They're high bandwidth users. And neither Windstream or Integra would provide them dark fiber. So we'll give you lit service. They go, we don't want to go through your data centers. We want to connect our 2 campuses. They missed an opportunity. So the proposal they gave us for lit service, we actually built another fiber ring for less than what they were in charge for lit service. We took ownership of that, and we entered into a 10-year agreement with them that in year 11 will start paying us actually a monthly or an annual fee for us managing the fiber for them. And we got a secondary path where I was all out of capacity in my east run laterals. My north-south, I have plenty of capacity. So that was how we got that. The state of Minnesota came to the prison that we have in St. Cloud, Department of Corrections, wanted to connect to, St. Cloud State is the hub for a lot of traffic leaving out of St. Cloud. Jim Johnson, the state of Minnesota, reached out to me and said, how close are you? I said, well, I can build it. Just give me a number. And we did, and we brought them online 2 years ago. So another project with Jim Johnson, we have a smaller mall that's just to the east of our big Crossroads mall. Was woefully underserved. The owner of that facility had been reaching out to CenturyLink and Charter to get fiber to the premise, a copper service coming in. They had a call center that was going to leave their building, or maybe even leave St. Cloud. The state of Minnesota had 6 agencies inside of that building. Jim reached out to me, what would it take to get fiber? Here we go, we did the same we have a boilerplate agreement that he goes find the funding and I do the construction and light them up and we're good to go. 2 months after we brought fiber into that building, both CenturyLink and Charter brought fiber to that building. It's interesting how it works. I know, Jeff, you had some of those issues where building your network, look what happened to the price. You didn't anticipate what the price of internet service was going to be in your community, but as a result of your build, you brought it down. Mark, your company's been a godsend for us. We do a lot of partnerships with Arvig. Arvig is actually, I have 3 data centers on my network. Arvig is serving customers out of 2 of those data centers. They are our biggest partner. We do a lot of either fiber swaps or expand. I just met with Midco yesterday. I'm getting the telecommunications company coming to us because we have this network. We don't provide lit service, we provide transport. That last middle mile where they can. My economic development folks on our website, I was going to bring up when we don't have internet on there. What we did on our website is like we have all our business parks and we list the services that are there. I was looking at what our economic development folks had on the website. They had power, water, and sewer. Nothing mentioning technology. So how do you, if you're looking to draw businesses to, like you were saying, Bill, they want to, one of the first things they're looking at is what is their internet bandwidth that they've got there. And so what we ended up doing is we reached out to all the providers, either we partner with them to get them into those business parks. We put their contacts, they're listed on our website, so when you're going through our economic development pages and you're looking at our business parks, it'll list everything. It tells you the speeds, everything you have. These are the little things that you have to do. It's like, you're talking about how do you get people to use it? It's one thing to have it there, but if you're not using it, it does you no good. So, as I was telling you, I've been meeting with Sartell, which is the only city that I don't have on our fiber right now. And they're building they took a project, they're building a new law enforcement center, working with the state of Minnesota to get them faster bandwidth into their new law enforcement center, and also connecting with the city. So I've been trying to get them for probably 7 years to get them onto the network. And it didn't work, but one of the things they did start doing from a recommendation, and then I asked the question earlier, the city of Sartell, when they started doing road projects, the IS manager would contact me and say, does it make sense to put conduit in here? And I said, well, send me a map of where all your facilities are, like their waste treatment plants, their community centers, all that. I said, if you look at those, that's where I would start to build your network, connect your buildings, because right now you're paying an internet drop for every one of those buildings. Once you have a fiber network and you connect those, you can do a single. That's what I do for the city. We bring all of our phone and internet into City Hall. So we distribute that all across our fiber network. Very same thing with school district. Matter of fact, the school district, they're building a new school, and their core of their network would not make sense to move to their new school because it's a replacement school actually. So we did a colo. I just went to council on money to get approval for the co-location agreement. They're going to be moving all of their data into one of my data centers, and we can do this because we share fiber and we have a connection. So that's helping. But the thing that I'm also looking at with Sartell is that their Sartell School District can share some of the same applications that the St. Paul School District does, and they can do it at a reduced cost. I said I have 3 data centers on my network. The other thing is looking at backup facilities for them. We can provide that. We can connect to these things. These are things that we do from the government that we don't traditionally do. Another thing that we're looking at right now, last fall we did a road project in south end of St. Cloud. For the first time, I was able to do a co-build with CenturyLink, Charter, several other smaller providers. And the other thing with the city engineer, what we looked at is the concept that we're trying is that we're going to provide an infrastructure path for them. So we build a conduit bank on one side of the road so we can say, this is where we want you to locate. Because all of our road projects get delayed. One of the hardest things to do is to get the relocation of facilities when you've got to expand the road. And so if you can minimize that time, because we have a short construction season, start building it. So we're doing a pilot to see how this works, and we got participation from all. I didn't think we'd see the day, but we did. So there's a lot of things we've done with our network. We originally built it for our own use, but now, since we've started leasing out the excess capacity we built into the network, we've reduced our operating costs where the school district and the city would get together on an annual budget, and it was costing us somewhere in the neighborhood of about $160,000 that we would take out of our budget to just maintain and manage that network. Now we've got it down to this year's budget, we're combined $60,000. So the revenue that we brought in with the partnerships, that we've reduced that cost almost $100,000. It works. And my goal, I told my board at our meeting, said that if I were planning, this thing will actually revenue positive instead of pulling from both of the entities. It's never what we intended it for, but that's what's happening. That's the economic benefit that the city and the school district are both getting from that fiber network. Any questions?
You say that 400 road miles?
Yeah, well, see, I have a lot of crisscross. So if you took and did OTR on my fiber, I've got over almost 400 miles of fiber. I go as far as 13 miles on St. Cloud is my longest run. That goes down to between Clearwater and Clear Lake. That picks up Clearview Elementary. I'm all the way past St. Joe from the further west end. I go up into all the surrounding communities around us. So we have a ton of fiber in the ground.
What kind of excess capacity do you have?
It all depends on where where, my eastern half of my, town, I have a ton of capacity, because I don't have to route it all the way to the west. I would say, like I said, I got over 2,000 strands of fiber coming into City Hall. I would say that probably about 40% of that is dark on the east side of town, probably 15–20% going to the west. My southern corridors, like what I'm building right now, I'm building in more capacity. So I've got a project right now that we will actually start building soon, the crossroads underground. That's for our new tech high school on the south side of town. We're overbuilding that. We're putting in, we're looking at a 288 fiber strand going just to the south, just to serve that one entity. But we know that that's where we've got growth coming in St. Cloud, so we know that there's going to be other partners going there. I've also started a redundant ring with that road project that's on 33rd coming in, where I'm bringing in another 96 from the east to the west. And so there'll be ample in that area. Then we do a lot of little lateral builds off those.
So you say how far east? About 13 miles?
Southeast is 13 miles to my longest run there. And that actually, man, that was another call to that. Sherburne County, as part of their county highway road projects, they started putting a duct system in. They actually they married their ducts up to that to my southern run, so that if they started to put had a need, they could come in off that run going down to between Clearwater and Clear Lake. And so we're reaching into that county, and they'll at some point we expect them to pull fiber into that.
Okay. Thank you, Micah. Okay, getting close to the end, we got one more summary wrap-up of legislation, this year's legislation, where they stand now. Nancy Hoffman, who chairs the Minnesota Rural Broadband Coalition, and Diane Wills from the Office of Broadband. And they're going to give us their take on things. I should mention also that when they're done, we'll officially be done. Anybody who feels the need to leave, go right ahead. I do need the members to stay, so you guys stick around a little bit, just a little bit.
All right, Diane was down to go first, but I'm going to go first because I'm a little briefer, and I'm sure she'll have a lot more detail than I have. Are you all familiar with the Minnesota Rural Broadband Coalition? Is anybody not? Because the Alliance is a member of the coalition, and I'll just briefly, because I know you might hear about it, know you remember, but you might not get involved. This was started a few years back by Landon Foundation, and they wanted it to be more sustainable, so they kind of handed it off, and so now we're really on our own, we're our own coalition. We hired Judy Erickson from Conservation, I always want to say conservative, yeah. Conservation Strategies, and she is our lobbyist. And we also hired AMC, who does some of our administration. We have some committees. We have an executive committee because we are now 80 members plus strong. And with that many members, you need to have a little committee that can make decisions quick. It reaches all cross sectors around the state and all parts of the state. We have education, health care, providers, cities, counties, you name it. They're all part of this. We have a legislative committee, which Joanna participates on, and that's a number of people that are lobbyists anyway, with different organizations, talking broadband, and so together they are strategizing and getting out to the legislators, so they're very impactful. We have an outreach committee, and I have to tell you, Dan Larson wanted to be here today, and he's on that committee, and he's strongly asked me to strongly ask you if you have any stories of folks in your areas that are either have a story because they don't have broadband or because now they do. And so if you have any, please contact him. He's he's really searching for those good stories to share for many purposes, but a lot of it for legislative reasons. And then we have a membership committee. If you want to be a member on your own, also outside of the Alliance, please contact Bill or go onto our webpage. It's easy to Google. So the coalition has always stuck with our ask is for $70 million per biennium, but we want ongoing financing. And in some things we've looked at for bienniums. You know, it's hard to say what that number will be, as we talked about today. Those numbers keep going up, and so it's hard to put a final number on that, but that is what we're looking for. We're also looking at speed goals for the 2026 goals of 100 by 20. We prefer to see that. We know in some cases that isn't possible, but we strongly advocate for that. And we also advocated for the governor to revive the broadband task force, and I see that he has done that. It's just a great way to keep those discussions going in the state on our needs for broadbands and have some possibilities to be innovative and come up with new ways to do things and get it done. We chose to stay out of the policies, even though we've had many discussions around things like the challenge process and the grants. We just keep going round and round. We just decided it's best to stay out of that for now. We really want to focus on getting that funding, and we hate to have some of those discussions get in the way of the funding this year. So on April 3rd, we did have a day on the Hill, and it was great to see Steve Grove, the new deed commissioner there. And he knows the importance of fast, reliable internet. We had our authors there, Senator Eric Simonson, Representative Rob Eklund, and Senator Mark Moran. Zelik and House Minority Leader Kurt Bell were also there to say a few words about their thoughts on broadband. Probably more importantly, though, afterwards we went to the Ag Housing and Rural Development. I think I might have done that backwards. Maybe it's Ag, Rural Development and Housing Committee. We've been to them a few times already just to share our priorities, but the Senate committee had taken that $70 million that they were originally sounded like they were going to advocate for and cut it down to $30 million. And so we had the opportunity to testify and state that we still want to see it at $70 million. It's my understanding the Senate is still at $30 million, the House is at $70, and the governor is also at $70. But this is all one-time financing. So we really, we just want to see the financing in place at the ongoing so that we know that this funding will be there. There were a couple questions earlier about, what do you do when you do part of your county and then the rest doesn't have the financing for it? How are we going to deal with that? It's very important for our long-term planning to have that money in place. I think I covered everything that I had. Just make sure to stay in front of your legislators and keep letting them know that we need this financing to get the job done. Diane?
I was just going to mention that in the bill that has the House bill that has the $35 million each year biennium, it's File 2208 is an omnibus bill. It also does include funding of $50,000 in fiscal year 20 for grants for broadband connections to support co-working space for startups. And I know Bill had kind of mentioned that in his presentation on some of the co-working spaces around the state, including in Ely. I'm also going to mention, I don't know what will happen to it, but in that omnibus bill in the House, there is also language regarding contracts for internet service, adherence to net neutrality requirements. It is not in the Senate version, obviously, since the Senate side is controlled by the Republicans, but it is in there, and if it stays, its applicability to the grant program, I think, is a question. The language in it is not as clear as a similar net neutrality bill that applies to state contracts for broadband that was passed and signed by the governor in Colorado. But just know that it's out there. Second reading in the Senate, it was last week anyway, it's the telecommuter forward bill, and that would allow a local unit of government to certify an area as ready for telecommuting or a telecommuter forward community. It And it would be a local unit of government applying to us to get certified as a telecommuter-ready community with a single point of contact for coordinating telecommuting, that it has coordinated and partnered with broadband providers, and economic development professionals, and it has telecommuter-friendly workspaces. A couple of other bills. There was a bill for $3.2 million in fiscal year 20 for a grant to the Mountain Iron Economic Development Authority to extend an existing fiber operated by NESC from Willow River to Pine City and from Cromwell to Aiken. Probably, definitely an area that lacks backhaul capacity. It does have budget implications. I did not see it in any, either the House or Senate budget sheets. Then there was a bill that the city of Scandia was working on. That's a city in northern Washington County that would create a subordinated services district to assist the creation or expansion of broadband service. This is what was used in Sunrise Township. I think the difficulty I have with this bill, and Nancy mentioned how hard it was to get 50% of the people to sign it. It would lower that standard to 25% of the property owners having to sign the petition. And it would exclude, normally an entire town is not allowed to do a subordinate services district. They would make an exclusion for that. It had its second reading in the House and in the Senate, so that I'm not sure what will happen to that one. But that one is out there. And then just more for your information, Senate File 628. So this is on the Senate side where the education consortia that run the technology for the consortia has been trying to get traction to get the telecom equity aid increased. That is the difference that is the states or the districts have to fund that E-rate doesn't fund. And they were at about 40% that the state funding was covering, and then the districts had to pick up the rest. They had some policy language changes that were adopted. I don't know how familiar you are with the technology consortia, but TIES was one of the big ones around the metro, and that kind of dissolved, and some of the districts went to Sourcewell. But some of them are standing alone, and normally if you were a standalone school district, didn't qualify for the T or the state portion of the funding. So the policy changes were to make it applicable so that standalone school districts could qualify. The problem is that the funding was only increased by $500,000 each year of the biennium, so now they're saying the proration will go down to about 20%. So it's really going to hit the rural school districts in the consortia hard. One example on the phone call that I was on yesterday was that the out-of-pocket cost for E-rate was 60 cents per student in the school, and probably due to Mike's efforts to lower costs there. Whereas in southwest Minnesota, the out-of-pocket cost per student can be $120. And so it was used to kind of equalize urban-rural, and it's kind of getting away from that with some of the policy changes and the fact that the state hasn't been funding that adequately. So again, that's something to watch for. It'll go to conference committee because the changes aren't in the House side. So, there's a lot of other bills with telemedicine implications as that is just growing and growing, but given our time limit, I didn't start listing those. When I saw the agenda, I'm like, okay, this is enough. but we're tracking the bills that have any kind of broadband implications. Are there questions on this slide?
So I understand the E-rate portion of it, are you saying as a non-consortium, someone could get equity aid?
Yeah, you don't have to be you can be a standalone school district, and if you're doing E-rate funding, you can, if the Senate version passes, it makes it so that you cannot be in a consortium and get funding. If that policy language passes, again, it's in the Senate bill, there is a countable language in the House. It would go to conference committee, I don't know what would happen. The consortia, which has usually been driving the changes and the request for the increase in funding, we're fine with the policy changes as long as the funding came up, because it's always been a shortfall. And so if it's fully funded by the state, they don't care if a standalone school district is eligible. Any other questions?
I want to thank everyone for coming today. A lot of information was out there, a lot of good conversation at lunch and everything else, what we hope to accomplish today. If you have any interest in what, becoming a member or participation with the Broadband Alliance, reply back to either Deb or Joanne on the email. You have their contacts. We'll be in touch. I was just asking Joanne, we'll check with everyone that presented. If you want to get a copy of the PowerPoints, we'll make those available on the ones that are on. So I think you'll find some information in there. But again, thanks for everyone for coming today. Have safe travels back. I know we've traveled all corners of the state, but we look to see you guys again.